14th NFL season. The 35-year-old Johnson missed the final 7 regular season games, as well as the Eagles' playoff loss to San Francisco with that Lisfranc injury. Johnson is a 2-time All-Pro, a 6-time Pro Bowler, a 2-time Super Bowl champion, and his impact to this team cannot be overstated. In his career, the Eagles are nearly 60 games over 500 when he's playing. In the 46 games he's missed, Philly has an under 500 record. Big news in Philly after an offseason that has been a few different interesting pieces of guys leaving. Why do you view Lane Johnson's return as so consequential, Bart?
Just veteran leadership, right? They've had their issues last year. They weren't the same offensive line they were. The previous year, losing Mekhi Becton, their inability to kind of get Saquon Barkley to the second level. Listen, he's been there, he's done that, and this is a team that's running out of leaders. And you talk about leadership inside the locker room. That's what Lane Johnson represents. Professionalism. He gives them the ability to capture the edge of the defense. And when he left, that running game lost a pop, and I thought Jalen Hurts didn't feel as protected as he was before, and emboldened to be able to, burp the baby, so to speak, to be able to push the ball down the field. Him coming back allows, Howie Roseman to address other issues that they have on this team. It's great because you don't get tackles in free agency. You draft them, you develop them, and this gives them the opportunity to say, okay, we know that he's hinting at retirement. Maybe we draft somebody and let him learn behind a great future first-time Hall of Famer.
He would. You played offensive line at a high level for many years.
Too.
Right tackle. So let me know, this particular player on that unit, given all the transitions that they're going to be having with the coaching staff and whatever else, how important is it that Lane's coming back?
Well, I want to use a word that a phrase that Mike T uses: force multiplier. He really is, and the stats bear that out. When he's not in there, it makes a huge difference because they really weren't able to capture the line of scrimmage. And we know that Jeff Stoutland, arguably the best offensive line coach in the National Football League, is moving on. So when you having that type of change, you need guys that, like Bart talked about, that veteran leadership, guys who are really good players to help stabilize not only the unit but that locker room. And so him coming back and committing for another season, I think that's big news for Philadelphia.
Mike, put yourself in Howie Roseman's shoes, GM of the Eagles, of course. How does this decision now impact the rest of the build for the team?
Yeah, this gives them a lot more flexibility. When you're building a team, Peter, ideally you have a phased-in approach at each position group. So you have one eye on today and one eye on next year. And we know they've lost Jason Kelsey, Mekhi Becton. If they lose Landon Dickerson, this is great news because now you have a couple of years to fill that spot, either draft maybe a 3rd or 4th round tackle this year, maybe a 1st rounder next year. So this is consequential flexibility that they need so they can attack some other weaknesses they have.
I think the Stoutland departure has not gotten enough press. Truly, this is one of the greatest offensive line coaches in the history of the sport. And they changed the offensive coordinator. Obviously, Patullo goes down to Miami. They bring in 32-year-old Sean Mannion. And Stoutland basically says, I'm good, I'm out. Talk to us about the replacement, Chris Cooper. You know him quite a bit.
Yeah, Peter, I think both things can be true. Jeff Stoutland was great, and Chris Cooper is going to be really good. I worked with him in Miami. People don't really know him, but he's going to be rock solid. And one thing that you can say about Nick Sirianni, I think he has managed his staff well. Obviously, they've made some changes on the offensive coordinator, but they've had, for the most part, sustained success there. And I think Chris Cooper will be very good. It's not going to happen overnight, but again, having Lane Johnson there to help with that transition is really important.
Damien, 32-year-old, first-time offensive coordinator, and maybe the most pressure-packed market there is. I think that job is one of the most interesting offensive coordinator gigs. I said it yesterday on the show. There's 21 new offensive coordinators. Sean Mannion, a former player and a quarterbacks coach from the Packers last year who's never called a play at any level, is taking over in Philly. How do you think this thing goes?
Listen, it's a very interesting decision by Howie Roseman and company to bring a first-time play caller in that young in Philadelphia. Listen, at the end of the day, I think this is a critical year for Nick Sirianni, considering everything that happened last year offensively, how they kind of fell off a cliff offensively as far as their efficiency and everything goes. If this guy doesn't get it done, not only are we talking about him we could talk about the whole coaching staff being out.
I think it's absurd that we keep putting Nick Sirianni on the hot seat. He's been to a Super Bowl. He's won a Super Bowl. What more do you want from me? It's what do you want from him? I don't see how he can be on a hot seat. I think, with his offensive background, maybe he, maybe mentors him and kind of, lends his expertise because that's the side of the ball in which he dominates.
All right, let's get to some other teams here. It's a segment that we call Too Low, Too High, or Just Right. And it's based off the DraftKings win projections that were just released online. Mike T, the Chiefs are projected at 10.5 wins. Is that too low, too high, or just right?
Peter, that is too high. I think this is a reputational 10.5 wins. Look, Patrick Mahomes is going to be Superman again, but unfortunately, we know it's not going to happen overnight. They also lack explosive weapons on the outside. They need a running back, and this offensive line is much more of a work in progress than the Eagles, so I'm going lower than 10.5.
All right, Bart, let's go in our backyard here in New York. The Giants' win total is 7.5 wins. Is that too low, too high, or just right? I feel like it's the three little bears here.
Right. I think it's just right. And you talk about Harbaugh coming in and establishing a new identity for this team is going to be built off physicality. I know everybody thinks they're going to go out and maybe get a receiver, but from what I know from Harbaugh, this looks like a right tackle to try and establish a foundation to protect Jackson Dart. I think, coming in is going to get maybe 1 or 2 games, once they have a professional there, but it's going to take a couple of years to turn this roster over and get the right type of players in the building.
All right, last one, D. Wood. The Jets are projected at 5.5 wins. Too low, too high, just right?
I want to say just right. There's a lot of change in Florham Park this year. Obviously, new defensive coordinator coming over from Miami, but we know Aaron Glenn is going to call the defense. Frank Wright is the new offensive coordinator. Who's the quarterback? Like that.
Don't know.
We don't know who the quarterback is going to be. They have a lot of assets to throw at this thing, but there's a lot of unknowns here. So I think 5.5 for me sounds just right for the New York Jets.
All right, we're going to hit plenty more teams in the next couple minutes, but that beat, a little dancing here. Time for a segment we're calling Kings of the North, the NFC North to be exact, and we're looking at the projected win totals that were just released by DraftKings. Now, we've got these question marks here, okay? The team with the highest projection for wins right now in February is the Packers at 10.5, despite the fact they did not win the division and they lost to the Bears those last 2 games. D. Wood, do you see the Packers getting above that number?
Yeah, I could see that easily. Listen, obviously we got to talk about Michael Parsons' health. When he's back healthy, they'll be one of the best defenses in the National Football League. Jordan Love, to me, is one of the most talented quarterbacks in this game. And when Jordan Love is playing at the level where he's not turning the football over, they are an elite offense. We've seen this from the Green Bay Packers. So, my opinion, I think the Green Bay Packers are going to be the team to beat in this division next year.
Mike T, maybe no one was more bullish on Jordan Love last summer than you. And it proved he had a good season. He wasn't an MVP, but he had a good season. They need to get him more weapons to get over those 10 wins?
I think they need to be more consistent. First of all, what are they going to do with Romeo Doubs? He's a free agent. Christian Watson has to stay healthy. And then last year's first-round pick, Matthew Golden's going to have to play as a first-round pick. If all that comes together, I agree with D. Wood. Very high ceiling. By the way, left tackle Rasheed Walker, also free agent.
Yeah, free agent.
I think they'll get that done, though.
Bart, the Mike of it all.
Yeah.
Do they need to get him more help now on the defensive side of the ball?
Well, we thought it was going to be a dynamic duel, a Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter type of situation with Rashawn Gary, who's a $100 million guy. He's going to have to step up because that defense fell off significantly when Michael Parsons wasn't there. I think it's predicated on being able to get to the quarterback, in this offense, getting in leads, and then, taking teams to deep water and then drowning them. So it's based on, can Rashawn Gary step his game up to kind of match Michael Parsons' intensity until he gets back healthy 100%.
I think a huge deal is Jeff Hafley, defensive coordinator who was so good for them the last couple of years. He is now the head coach of the Dolphins. All right, second team. We know who won the division, but let's see what DraftKings says. Let's bring it. Lions, more than the Bears. Okay, very interesting. Mike T, do you like this number? 10.5 for the Lions.
I think that's about right. Again, if this team is healthy on both sides of the ball, guys like Brian Branch in particular, if they can play 17 games, I really like this team. Again, very high ceiling. But boy, do they need a pass rusher opposite Aiden Hutchinson.
Yeah.
If they get that done and their nucleus plays most of the season, I think we're going to go over 10.5.
I think here's the question I have for the Lions. You're right about the pass rush. Their offensive line didn't play nowhere near as well as they did. And Taylor Decker, their left tackle, been talking about retirement. They need to address their offensive line if they want to be one of those contending teams in the NFC, in my opinion.
What do you think, Lions?
I think it's about right. They just can't stay healthy. You talk about sustaining, injuries. I think, Campbell's maybe is going to have to start thinking about how he approaches practice. When you practice so hard and play so hard, the byproduct of that is sometimes guys wear down. They got to figure out how to get these guys healthy late in the season so they can make this playoff run, because that window is closing for them, because they have Laporta's going to be up before you know it. They have guys that they're going to have to address their contract situations. They have to win now.
7 teams from the NFC made the playoffs. The Lions were not one of them. Fascinating hire. Drew Petzing, comes from the Arizona Cardinals as their offensive coordinator, is the new man calling the plays in Detroit. Something to watch. All right, third team we expect to be the Bears. It is the Bears at 9.5. Bart, third team in the division, is that disrespectful, or do you think this seems just about right?
It's not. I think it's about right. It's the course correction, right? We talk about all the turnovers they were fortunate to get. We talk about the late game heroics by Caleb Williams. He has to be more consistent. You talk about completion rate at somewhere in the 50s. That's not sustainable. We always talk about greatness is doing the small things and making them look routine. He has to do the small things. He's got the knack for the dramatic. He has to start doing the 1-2, hit the slant, rhythm, timing, things like that to be able to be successful.
All right, D. Wood, I thought Caleb was absolutely phenomenal in the playoffs when it mattered most. 9.5, not even double-digit wins for a team that was a play away from playing in the NFC Championship game.
Sometimes you see these teams that they go from worst to first. They come back down to the means because they're playing a first-place schedule. All those turnovers that they got this year, that is not sustainable. So Chicago could be one of those teams. But I will say this, if they can address their defense, and I think their head coach kind of hit it on the head. He was like, we're not even going to think about momentum carrying over to 2026. No, this is a whole new year, whole new roster. I think if they have that mentality, I think good things will happen for the Chicago Bears.
Talks about the defense here. They got a lot of great production out of guys like Grady Jarrett and Kevin Byard, who are long-term veterans. Should they go big star hunting, and should we consider a Max Crosby or a Myles Garrett type if you're Chicago?
Absolutely, and here's why, Peter. Caleb Williams is going to year 3, so they have another year on his rookie contract. That's like a built-in $30 million buffer against your cap to the presumptive amount of what his extension will be. So go win right now. Go get somebody opposite Montez Sweat, Trey Hendrickson, Max Crosby, whoever it is, because they need to have a win-now mentality, because once that extension happens, it's going to be hard to keep this nucleus together.
Bart, you got all these eggs, and they're all. Do you put them all in that one basket and go for a Myles Garrett offer of 4 first-round picks, something like that?
Yeah, not for me, because we saw this movie before with Khalil Mack with the same team with the Raiders, and it didn't work out so well. I think maybe you go with something, maybe you try and hit a double instead of trying to hit the home run. You go with a guy like Bradley Chubb, maybe Owe, bring guys in there that you can still have flexibility. I don't know about gutting, my war chest to give up all my draft equity in the future, because I need flexibility in case those guys like Bird, they start, graduating out of the program.
Okay, interesting one here. We're going to go to the 4th team in the division, because this might be the biggest variable of all the squads in the NFL. It's the Minnesota Vikings. And they actually won a bunch of games at the end of the season, but you don't leave the season with a great taste because of the Darnold situation and what the Seahawks did, and the Vikings let them walk. Bart, what are your thoughts? 8.5 wins for the Minnesota Vikings.
Listen, that was some of the worst quarterback play I've seen. I think we thought that, Kevin O'Connell can come in and just coach anybody up and just, replace the quarterback and it's just system and all that stuff. They would have did better with Daniel Jones as well. They let 2 quarterbacks walk out of the door. And they got to bring in some competition for McCarthy, because I think he's a little bit too comfortable. And Justin Jefferson, you can't be wasting his prime at all either. This is a Super Bowl roster, every position but the quarterback.
D. Wood, your thoughts?
Listen, I absolutely agree. They need to bring in competition at the quarterback position. The quarterback is in the ice tub too much. You can't help your team in that manner. Offensive line, they need to improve that area as well. But, Bart, I think you're right. Can't waste Justin Jefferson's career. This dude is, in my opinion, I think he's the best receiver in the game. You can't flounder him with subpar quarterback
Does it
play.
feel, I know it's February and we have a roster, but does it feel like it's these 3 teams and then the Vikings and there's a major gap, or do you feel like it's all 4 are kind of in the same deal?
For me, it depends. I mean, if they go get, Willis and bring him in and see if he'll take a Sam Darnold-type contract, a proven contract, and with hopes of being the quarterback of the future, it gives them opportunity to compete within the division, I think, immediately.
I think Malik Willis could be looking at $30 to $35 million. I'm not sure that's in their plans. Who would you look at as quarterback competition for Minnesota?
Peter, for me, it's Kyler Murray. When we're talking about the next redemptive story, the Sam Darnold to Seattle, let's go with Kyler Murray and have him compete with J.J. McCarthy. His ceiling's extremely high. To me, this is a Super Bowl-ready roster on both sides of the ball. D would mention, Justin Jefferson amongst others. And if I'm Kyler Murray, I am walking from Arizona and Minnesota to say, Kevin O'Connell, how much do I have to pay you?
Really? You would
coach me?
Tyler makes some good money right now. Now, you would say take a discount and try to prove it just like the other guys
well,
do?
of course, like Kevin is a former Jet, so we had to get him into
Sure.
the conversation. But look, Kevin is great with quarterbacks, and if I'm Kyle Murray at his age and this inflection point of his career, go invest a year or two, get coached up, and see what happens. And with this offensive line, those weapons, to me, you're not getting paid for this year. You're investing in your future.
Bart, you made a face. Malik Willis, $30 million. Do you think that's just ridiculous?
No, not at all. I think that's kind of what the going rate is, right? And I think that still gives you the flexibility with hopes that if he performs like Sam Darnold did, then maybe you can, extend him and get him a longer deal. But McCarthy has to be – he got a general manager fired, and he's on the way to getting his coach fired because those are the guys that stood on the table and said, we don't need Sam Darnold. We don't need Daniel Jones. And, consequences will happen.
Powerful stuff.